I think most people hear Pinocchio and think of a wooden puppet with a growing nose and a dream to become a real boy. A happy Disney story, right? But the truth is, the Italian original Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi is nothing like that. No. This, you see, it's brutal, it's bleak, and it's filled with pain. So forget what you think you know about the boy made of wood. In Collodi's version, Pinocchio is mischievous, reckless, and selfish. He kills a talking cricket with a hammer. He lies to avoid consequences. He frequently disobeys Geppetto and the Blue Fairy, or in the original, the fairy with turquoise hair. By the way, she's a supernatural sort of mother figure who represents strict, conditional morality. But Pinocchio is constantly punished by life for his troublesome behavior. He gets his feet burned off, he's hanged, he's betrayed, and every time he strays from obedience, the world chews him up and spits him out. The book was a warning, a tale of morality disguised as a child's story, meant to scare kids into behaving. Disney cleaned that up. They gave Pinocchio charm, softened the consequences, and gave us a warm ending about redemption. But Lies of P doesn't follow the Disney version. It pulls us back into something closer to the original. It is darker and colder, and when you see some of these monsters, these bosses, it's more appalling. So then what is Lies of P about? One might say, in a sentence, the cost of human desire. We're going to be going through the base game and Overture, the DLC, as well as a bit of New Game Plus. Yes, after beating the game the first time, I immediately had to go through it again because there is some stuff you miss by only playing it once. Temper your expectations because this is going to be a relatively basic approach to the overarching story. While I will go into detail, it's just me sharing what I gradually uncover, extending some thoughts and theories. I believe I will get some things wrong, and there are still some questions I have. But if you are a Lies of P expert, I would actually love for you to point out anything I might have missed or misunderstood. As always, I don't watch other people's videos for the most part because I want my videos to be authentic and genuine, closer to my original experience. This is a story explained and not a lore video. There is a difference. If you are into story explained, psychoanalysis, or thought experiment video essays, don't lie to yourself. You know you want to hit that like button. Or you can keep lying and hit that dislike button, as all engagement is engagement, but since you're still here, you're coming with me. Welcome to the story of
Lies of P.
In the abyss of a sleeping unconsciousness, a woman's voice echoes, asking if we can hear her. Fading into consciousness in view is a luminescent blue butterfly, and she lands on the chest of someone slumped in a chair. She says she needs their help, dispersing into what she calls Geppetto's puppet. Its tin left hand clenches as the figure rises up out of the chair at the ready. It was as if it wasn't actually sleeping, but rather waiting to be activated. Moving along through this regal train, Sophia, the blue fairy inside of us, leads to a chirping light on the floor, a robotic talking cricket, Jiminy, and picking him up, we are to go to the Hotel Krat and find out what's happening. Walking over blood and mannequin parts, we arm up with the sword. Outside, we see that we're at Krat Central Station, but there are bloodied bodies all around. There's been a massacre, and the only thing moving is the red-eyed tin man trying to kill me. After adjusting to the unforgivable perfect guard mechanics and learning that the parry windows are tighter than my backside when my wife calls me by my name, I love my wife, we push these giant doors out of the station and into Krat Central Plaza. Repairing the bonfire, Sophia explains that the Stalkers used this in the past. I'll explain the different factions in brief as we come across them. The Stalkers are one of the factions in Lies of P, and even have their own subdivisions or hierarchy, like the Bastards, or the High Class, and the Sweepers, or the Low Class. These animal mask-wearing individuals are fighters, well respected by the citizens of Krat, and some kids, as you will see, even want to be a Stalker. Stalkers kind of do a wide variety of things, from merc work, banditry, to even being bodyguards. But Sophia tells us that we can get stronger by collecting Ergo, which we obtain by defeating enemies. After doing just that, we pick up a paper that gives us some historical context. A massive puppet rebellion, known as the Puppet Frenzy, paralyzed the city of Krat, causing hundreds of deaths and forcing a delay of what is called the Grand Exhibition. The chaos began on Rosa Isabel Street, with the workshop and Venigni company trying to manage the damage by supplying aid. Authorities suspect a failure in the Grand Covenant, the control system for the puppets, but more on that later on. However, no solution has been found. Meanwhile, citizens are also panicking over a possible return of the petrification disease. More on that too. Leading many to flee through Krat Central Station despite safety warnings, worsening the crisis. Now, this gives us quite a bit of insight and explains the dead bodies all over. The Workshop Union. It's one of the major factions in the story, and they are the technological backbone of Krat. Think of them as the industry engineers responsible for developing and maintaining the puppets that powered the city's daily life. They worked closely with the Venigni company, Krat's largest puppet factory, helping spread the use of automatons. Now, you and I both know what happens when humans try to automate everything with robots. I mean, you can just ask these people lying face down in the rain and blood, or maybe there is more to the story. However, all of that should have never happened because the workshop programmed the puppets to operate under a central protocol called the Grand Covenant. It was a sort of law or code that ensured puppets followed orders, that they only served and never harmed humans. However, something caused this uprising, this puppet frenzy. And we need to find out what, because whatever this is, it's not over. This is just the beginning, and I have a feeling the worst is yet to come. Piercing our way through this gothic city, as the storm adds to the oppressive atmosphere, we see ourselves on a bridge, coming up to a threat that Sophia warns us about. Lies of P came out in 2023. If you've already played this game, then you know what comes next. Punching the gate open, the Parade Master, once meant to be a form of entertainment but now a big scaly monster, takes a note out of Nier Automata. He speaks in a language we don't understand until New Game Plus. But don't worry, again, I beat the game twice just to decode what he said. After blowing up the big guy, we walk up to the stone stairs and Sophia says that the hotel security isn't going to let us in and that we need to lie, noting that I am a special puppet. I was trying to be good in this playthrough, attempting to tell the truth about being a puppet, but that hardwalls us, and the only way forward is by lying. So I guess even when I want to be good, the world requires that I'm bad. Opening the door, the cameraman pans out and we see this awesome opening cinematic, which actually gives us pretext to what the city life was like before the plague. The hotel feels like the last breath of elegance and protection in a dying city. Marble floors, warm light with a golden timepiece spinning above the lobby. Beneath it stands turquoise-haired Sophia, with a real pocket watch pinned to her chest and a blue butterfly that almost feels symbolic. I am certain she is this world's blue fairy. She warmly welcomes us, but I can't help but feel there is something heavy and dreadful about her. Perhaps it's the way that she looked like she was working up that smile. As it stands currently, we still have yet to gain any answers to the ordeal we've been woken up to. She tells us that we need to find Geppetto. Then she notices how Gemini is not himself, as he normally isn't so calm, so she fixes him, and before sending us off, she gives us this mystical watch, which, when we die, will automatically turn back time to when we were in peak condition, which means we can die all we want, and die we do. Walking over to a lady in a wheelchair, we talk to the proprietress of the hotel, Antonia. She can't get up because she's down with a sickness, and she tells us to hurry and find Geppetto, and then she gives us some men's clothes, which I will put on later. She remarks, but doesn't seem one bit astonished, that we were able to lie to get into the hotel, that we are able to dictate our own path. Just like any human, this puppet is unchained and unbound by being enslaved to preordained and paved paths. Then Antonia talks about how close she is with Geppetto, but also how his son was much like family to her. Speaking with this butler puppet, who is absolutely just a regular puppet, nothing special about him whatsoever, I'm the only special one here, Paul and Dina educates us on the Grand Covenant, basically programming for the automatons that say we will obey, we will not harm, we will protect and serve, and we can't lie. With those directives in place, in theory, the automated servants would do their duties diligently without issue. Remembering that Geppetto could be in danger, I speak with Sophia about Ergo. She explains that Ergo is the element that brings life to puppets and is also what brought wealth and prosperity to Krat. Naturally, this is the power source we use to level up and get stronger. Rolling up to Eugenie, she arms us with our arm with what's called a Legion arm, giving us Sekiro vibes, but basically allows us to do special moves. She continues that she is part of the workshop union and says that we can go to her for weapon upgrades. Oh, there's a cat here. Oh, never mind. I forgot I look like a dog, right? Meow. After being hissed away, I take the dog mask off and head to the streets of Elysian. But it wasn't until I was on the city rooftops that I realized something interesting. You see, Liza P was made by South Koreans. People's names are Italian, the city has a German name, and the buildings look French, at least to me. After a while of dying, I come to a window of a woman who's crying about her baby, who was taken away from her by her own family. Now, naturally, she asks us to bring her baby, which is already suspicious in it of itself. If I were a parent, to hell with my family, the puppet frenzy, or the petrification disease, I would have never been separated from her, nor would I sit back and wait for someone to come help. I would be out there in these streets, misbehaving to get her back. But we all can't be hypothetically great parents. Speaking of great parents, we come to a bridge where we see signs rallying to purge puppets, and at the other end of the bridge is someone screaming at Geppetto to come out. This mad donkey accuses him of knowing the cause of the frenzy, as he is their creator. But then he also says that he's scheming with the Alchemists, another major faction. I don't want to spoil too much, but just know that for now, they are scientists who are like if Bloodborne's scholars teamed up with Bioshock's gene splicers. Yeah. He's not immediately hostile towards us, but once he realizes we are a puppet, he quickly turns into an adversary. The stalker asks if we're a dream or a nightmare, demanding that we stop showing up, but I've never seen this dude before. I guess if I kept dying and came back, that would have been some cool fourth wall shit, but luckily for us, I am mighty. He falls to his knees, muttering his last words about seeking the truth, and in those final moments, he was thinking of his allies, which makes me think maybe he wasn't so bad after all. Geppetto steps down, smiling when he sees us, his son, but we're here to find out what's going on. He explains that as the inventor of the puppets, he needs to take responsibility for the frenzy. He wants to right his wrongs, but first he says we need to take care of the murderous puppets at City Hall. On our way, we find this abomination of a body twisted into and sprawling up the wall like it was trying to escape its own skin with black roots and blue bile leaking out. Oh god, I don't think you guys understand. If you had this petrification disease, it would be nasty, the things that it does to you. Moving on, one thing leads to another, and I actually find that baby's mother. But surprisingly, or maybe surprisingly not, it's a puppet. Giving Elena back to her mother, she is elated. But then she asks me if I thought she was adorable, which stunned me. I wanted to lie and leave her happy. However, I already went into this deciding I would only tell the truth. But the lie sounds so sweet and the truth does not feel good. And when I presented her with the truth, the reality of it is that it doesn't change anything, because to her she's real. And so we continue. Not knowing what this blue basin of blue mystical water does, I break a star frag over it. And then after the fact, a tutorial tells me it's how I summon my summons to help me in a battle. So shout out to the Spectre who helps me out in all of my boss fights. This mechanical behemoth of a Watchman also spews encrypted words, and even with the Spectre, he destroys me. Round 2, I get cocky thinking I captured lightning in the bottle, but then he picks me up and feeds me to the cement. With the Spectre getting the last blow on RoboCop, he wails to death. His screeching and the way he moved made me think that there was probably more to him if only I could understand what he was saying. I'm not sure if he was solely a murderous death machine. Perhaps he was actually sad and in pain. This is further supported by the item we received, the small wooden officer puppet, which reveals RoboPuppet had a name, Murphy, and the kids loved him. On a nearby bench we get a whistle, and written on the floor we see it. They were all friends. It doesn't change the fact that he stepped to me first, but I don't know. Something's weird. I'm missing something. Back at the hotel, I find a book Jiminy says is about a mischievous wooden puppet, one that would become famous across all of Krat because it was someone's favorite. The book is a clear nod to Pinocchio, but it also makes you wonder who had enough influence to spread it, and who did they love enough to immortalize it. Now in Geppetto's office, we can sort of see a little bit of the work he was doing with bringing life to the automatons. Speaking to our father, he tells us to save his friend Venigni at the factory, but before we leave, he tells us to always be a good boy to him. Freaking weirdo. I mean, what kind of father tells his son to be a good boy? That's sus, bro. Wild statement. Venigni moved in the same circles as Geppetto, but he was more of the front showman for Venigni Works, responsible for the mass puppet production, charming the public, selling innovation, while Geppetto worked behind the scenes. Arriving at the factory, I found one of the manager's reports addressed to Venigni. It details a quiet investigation into the Alchemists, revealing that the quality of Ergo is declining, likely due to their secret experiments, possibly even involving the discarded bodies of puppets to a place that is called the Barren Swamp. And I hate swamps, not as much as I hate puzzles, but I hate swamps, so hopefully we'll never have to go there. Advancing further, I find a note about a doctor who stole records from the Alchemists and started creating his own medicine for the petrification disease following their manufacturing process. He followed exactly what the Alchemists had in their records and sold the medicine to everyone who had the disease, but it only made things worse and created these abominations. At a later point, Pinocchio, and I'm just going to call him Pinocchio for now, would come across some stalkers, a woman and a boy. A fox and a cat. And this wouldn't be the last we see of them. Heading back inside, we find out about a man who fell in love with a puppet and married her. This caused an uproar, but for him, he insisted that his wife had a soul. What do you think about this all so far? A mother and a baby, a husband and a wife, but puppets, are they real? Do they count? Do they have souls? By the end of this video, maybe you'll learn a certain detail that could shift your perspective, whatever it is that you answered. And maybe it'll help you comment with a well-informed answer. Finding notes by Descartes, I'm pretty sure it's a nod to René Descartes, which is nice and fitting for the themes of this game, he talks about a puppet called Fuoco, Italian for fire. Descartes initially thinks that he's being controlled by the king of puppets, but then would observe that it wasn't obedience, because Fuoco was acting out of faith as he worshipped this king of puppets as a god. Then he adds that it's a problem for puppets to have human ego. The concept of ego in real life was originated by Sigmund Freud, referring to the part of the mind that manages reality and self-control. And you've likely heard or learned about the id, ego, and superego in psychoanalytic theory. Here in Lies of P, I think it's interesting for them to leave that nugget for us to pick up and eat, as it mirrors human conscience in a way, and talking about these puppets and Fuoco going from obedience to self-awareness is just mind-blowing. Like, they really put this stuff in here. That's amazing. Sorry for the tangent. I can't help it. I love psychology. But soon we would meet Fuoco. The king's flame spews words like a rapper. Fire. But we can't understand what he's saying. He smashes the soul right out of me, and after about an hour of dying, Spectre and I extinguish his flames. But wait, where was Venigni? Oh, that's right. I totally walked by him so many times and forgot about him, which sucked because there was a stargazer right here and it could have saved a lot of walking, but I digress. After meeting with Venigni, he tells us about a cathedral of puppets and refugees. You can see where this is going. And after saying arrivederci to him, we regroup at the hotel. Coming up to Sophia, she tells Pinocchio that she is a listener, one who can wield and hear Ergo. She inherited this power from her mom, who condemned the power as devilish, causing her to keep her abilities as a secret. I wonder who her parents are, or if Sophia is even human, but she furthers that Pinocchio is the only puppet she can talk to now, due to the havoc the puppet frenzy and petrification disease has wrought. I still want to know what caused the frenzy and disease. Stepping over to Venigni, he congratulates us on cutting off the puppet's abilities to create armies. Then he strokes himself, and I get the sense that this pompous man is probably secretly a bad guy. But for now, he seems to be relatively genuine. He even mentions how his animated butler is family to him, which is a plus in my book, so maybe I'm just judging him too harshly too soon. He is acknowledging the sentience of his puppet after all. Feeling that I could trust him, I ask him what started the puppet frenzy, because nobody seems to know, and unfortunately all he knows is that one specific day a violent rampage was unleashed upon Krat. He extends that he believes the king of puppets is likely the cause, as he is the only one with that kind of power to raise an army. Geppetto says he didn't make every single puppet in Krat, and that he even noticed some puppets acting of their own volition before the frenzy, despite the Grand Covenant. But then he realizes something as he puts his gloves to his chin, that the puppets could have free will if they aren't being controlled. But he brushes that thought to the side and continues the conversation, saying that Krat is probably not how I remembered it, which begs the question, who was I before I was this puppet? Why is it that I don't remember anything but everyone around me seems to remember everything about me? Heading towards the cathedral on the outskirts of the village, we actually find hints of another threat. Something killed these puppets. Perhaps it was this stalker who was waiting by the tram. She warns us of the dangers and decides to try and kill us, as death from below is better than whatever horrors await us at the cathedral above. When she falls, she talks about a cursed angel's wing, singular, not plural, on some Sephiroth top. Riding the cable car to the top, now directly in front of us, we find out what was killing the puppets. Whatever these abominations are, they're missing their heads, and they almost seem to act like zombies, but they have blue blood and organs. After cutting a swath through these diseased creatures, we find an alchemist named Giangio, who says he found a way to slow the disease. His skin is white and his hair is blue, almost like those creatures, and he's trying to find a cure, but a key ingredient to this cure is a mythical tree, whose fruit resembles golden coins. The golden fruit performs miracles, but miracles come with a price. Hearing puppet voices, but unable to decipher their meaning, we proceed further into the cathedral. I actually was able to see what they said in New Game Plus, but forgot to record it. However, I will try to remember to tell you what they said later on. Opening up the grand bridge with the cathedral towering behind, we see the monsters killing the puppets, and after drenching myself in blue blood, I stand on this stone symbol on the floor. It depicts an eye with a tear and reads Omnis Peccatoris Sumus, which translates to "We are all sinners." Unofficially named Pinocchio eventually reaches the top of the cathedral where the glorious sunlight blesses us. There is one person up here, a stalker, who is surprised that we don't know him, Alidoro the Hound, treasure hunter. But he speaks more like a con man. However, still trying to be good, I tell him that he can take refuge at the Hotel Krat. I hope I don't regret this decision. Descending down below, we finally meet the one-winged angel. Whatever this monstrosity is, it used to be the Archbishop. Now how could a holy man, one of God, become so corrupted? Just a personal question I'm asking myself, but after beating him, of course, he has a second form. Oh god. Did you see the face of whatever snaked out of there? Fuck, that was horrifyingly disgusting to look at. I love the boss designs in this game. A series of unfortunate deaths later, and I kill the fallen one. But when I do, something happens with the Ergo, not just from this boss in front of us, but all of the previous bosses that we've defeated so far.
And now, the stage is set.
I never understood why bad guys laugh. Like, what is so funny? As the Archbishop's Ergo dissipates, his voice echoes that he wishes he could go back to when before greed took over him. On our next path, we see that whatever this corruption is, has infected the poor animals down here. Discovering a rusted stargazer in this small graveyard, we're going to be coming back here later for an overture. For those who don't know, an overture is a musical piece that acts as an introduction, usually in the beginnings of operas or plays, and it's a derivative of the French word for opening, as it opens and prepares the audience for what's about to happen. Proceeding through the night and into the ruined fortress, now taken over by the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, we find the fox and the cat again, who offer to join forces. And against my better judgment, I agree, which I immediately regret once I hear the boy call me a dumbass. Again, I want it to be good, but now I just really want to incinerate them. Next run. We spearhead our way through until conveniently in front of this mark, they decide they're exhausted and want to take a break. Proceeding, I would hear a telephone ring in the distance, and answering it, we're met with an enigmatic, Joker-esque voice, the Riddler, Arlecchino. He presents us with a riddle that I once saw from a movie back in 3rd grade, so I already knew the answer, but he tells us that his next riddle won't be easy. Arlecchino is definitely an interesting character. Entering the building, we find a note informing us that this place is called the Monad Charity House, but that it also has another name, the Rose Estate. Originally just a charity foundation for poor children, the Monad family funded it and transformed it into a boarding school for orphans. Here, they could receive education and training to become self-sustaining and contributing citizens of society. But scribbled at the bottom of this note were the words of 2 kids, with one telling a Romeo to knock it off. Finding the fox and cat above me, they seem to not be tired anymore, so I guess they can help me. But their nonchalant demeanor tells otherwise. Now, they are stupefied and impressed by my skills, but wonder if I would be taking on the Black Rabbit Brotherhood alone. I guess they won't be helping, but at least I have my trusty summon. I wonder who this specter is. After clashing blades with the Brotherhood, I kill their eldest.
This puppet's crazy! Damn you. You'll pay for that.
Inside, we find a ledger, showing that they've been selling Ergo to an old man who might even be eating it. But then we see that they've been struggling to meet the Alchemist's demands for gold-coined fruit, worrying that the hotel is onto them. Later pages reveal that they were also selling corpses and planning to flee the city, though unsure of whether or not to accept a vague proposal from the Alchemists. Checking out one of the rooms, we find a portrait of a boy, who oddly and almost too coincidentally looked like us. Why would there be a portrait of me at the Rose Estate? Taking an elevator up, we find Giangio once again, standing with his head down, bathed in a single stream of light, and I can't tell if he's aura farming or just brooding. Head down, top hat, black coat, blue hair. Talking with him, he repeats his dialogue from back at the cathedral as if he never met us or is a different person. So he tells us that on the other side of the door is a gold coin tree, and he implores us to go get and give him some coins, due to the fact that having the petrification disease prevents him from even getting close to the tree because it burns him. But wait, hold on. This tree, this section, the elevator, connects the Monad charity house, where the Black Rabbit Brotherhood was, to the hotel. That seems like a breach in security, and hopefully those stalkers don't attack and ransack the hotel. Talking with Eugenie, she asks about Alidoro and how he saved her life once, so maybe he's not so bad after all. And then she says that I'm not the only one who's curious about where she's from and how most people eventually ask, considering she's Asian. Not once did I ever ask or wonder that. Pinocchio never asked. Did you guys see Pinocchio say that? Because I didn't. She just starts telling us about how she's from the land of the morning, which is South Korea, by the way. And then she starts trauma dumping on me, talking about how her parents were reputable weaponsmiths who deserted her as a kid, and how she is hardly exotic. Look, Eugenie, nobody asked, nobody here has a problem with you, nobody made a comment about you being exotic. You're fine. Receiving a wavelength decoder from Venigni, he believes that there is something more to the Ergo within the puppets, causing them to become aggressive. And he wants me to try to decode their signals because he thinks it's suspiciously too simple for the king of puppets to be behind everything. The inventor postulates that the Ergo itself is corrupted. It's nice to see him feeling remorse and owning up to the actions of his creations. He's trying. When we check in with Antonia, she says she knew the tree, of course, was at her hotel this whole time and that the alchemists were interested in it. The gold coin fruit is optimized to respond to Ergo, and I'm sure we're going to learn about that later on. She said she sealed the tree off from everybody because of the fighting that it caused, but she didn't know that the Black Rabbit Brotherhood had access to it and was stealing the fruit this whole time. What's done is done, and now we need to find the Puppet King. Along the way, we find a book about the mysterious Rose Estate incident. For some reason, investigations into what actually happened ceased. For an incident where there were no survivors, it was still just chalked up to being the result of the petrification disease. It is also mentioned that Valentinus Monad, head of the Rose Estate but also leader of the Alchemists, died during this event. Speaking to a gentleman standing in the corner by a sewer, he inquires with us to go seek out his wife. How are you going to ask another man to come save your wife or go look for your wife when you're perfectly capable standing around with your thumb up your top hat doing nothing? You don't deserve your wife. You don't even look pressed, bro. But okay, walking through the burning city, we find his wife, but surprisingly, it's a puppet. Guys, this is the dude from the letter at Venigni's factory, the man who fell in love and married his puppet wife. I don't have the recording, but if you go back to where his wife's location was, later in the game, you'll see her body slumped to the side, and there she wrote that she still loved him. Returning the wedding ring to her husband, he insists that she was real and had a soul, asking me if I've ever seen that before. I tell him the truth, because I haven't. And now, he's a bit broken, not sure what to believe. Damn, should I have left him to his bliss? Should I have lied? After killing this mad clown jerk, he's got a really creepy face, we find our way over to the opera house where we would open the doors to stand before the king. Now, That was a very interesting scene of Geppetto and Pinocchio. But the real question is, why did the king show us that play at all? What was he trying to tell us? After going toe-to-toe with the king, we finally destroy him. But of course, he's got a second form. They gave this boss a face, and his name is actually Romeo. I wonder if it's the same one mentioned from before. He says some encrypted stuff and flies towards us with his scythe, and I just realized my Spectre has a scythe as well. After getting farmed for a few hours, I'm finally able to burn him to death, and I was freaking out here because one more hit and I probably would have died again. But what is interesting is the item that he drops. It's a graduation necklace that was given to this Romeo. The boy who gave this to him was a dear friend who resented his father because he didn't show any interest in him. It would suck if Romeo was actually our friend and we just got forced to kill him because our father told us to. Nah, that wouldn't happen. There's something more. There's something somebody is keeping from us. Exit stage right, speak of the devil, and he appears. Geppetto is here, waiting for us. With no king, the lesser puppets would surely lose direction. But Romeo was the cause of the puppet frenzy, right? Well, we still don't know. However, the petrification curse is still lingering, so we need to address that, and Dad tells us to go to the Grand Exhibition because the Alchemists supposedly have a cure. On the way over there, we see how the remaining puppets are behaving. They seem to be mourning their king. How human-like of them. Trekking over to the Grand Convention, we find a poster for a Monad Charity House concert, and on the sponsorship page, we see Sophia's name on there. Was Sophia at the Monad House? Later, we find a book talking about somebody named V, who is obviously Venigni, and you'll see why soon. He writes that he was the one who built the manufacturing company for the automatons. It further dives into his hidden and tragic past. You see, someone who wasn't human, but a being made of steel, brutally murdered his parents, which incidentally motivated and drove Venigni into succeeding in the puppet industry. I think there's quite a bit to uncover there, but in due time. With the Grand Exhibition in the distance, Jiminy tells us that the plan was to showcase the animatronics and the rest of the advanced technology in Krat, but with the frenzy and the plague, the exhibition was cancelled. Working our way in and fighting these robots, I'm reminded of Fallout. Answering another riddle, the king insinuates that I'm cheating. But I definitely love puzzles, and I don't have IGN's answer sheet pulled up. This next report that we find is very important. We learn about Crowd, which at this point is still, I guess, likely a mineral-based semi-sentient material like Dasein from another game I covered, Karma the Dark World. Crowd predates the city of Krat. It reacts to Ergo, and its growth is tied to the spread of the petrification disease and the overexploitation of Ergo, suggesting that it is part of a larger ancient ecosystem that alchemists disturb. Maybe it's something alien or from another dimension. As we trudge further into the exhibition, it's time for a good old one-on-two boss fight.
Welcome to my grave. This is where evolution becomes real. Fear me. I am Victor, the champion.
What's interesting is that he talks about evolution, but what's more interesting is that this Frankenstein's monster can talk at all, unlike most of the other abominations that we've met. This is a reminder that there are still some questions we don't have answers to. Questions like, what are the puppets really? What caused the frenzy? What are these monsters? Are they connected to the humans who had the petrification disease? Are they a result of what happens when the disease progresses too far, or is this a mutation caused by the supposed cure for the disease? Why do they bleed blue, or is this blood at all? Because like Sophia, like Pinocchio, maybe they're using Ergo. Just like how Bane from DC Comics injects himself with Venom, it looks like Victor just injected himself with Ergo. So maybe these humans are trying to use Ergo. He talks about the new world and the power of the reborn, but I still wipe that ass like a newborn baby.
Why be humble? I am evolved. A better man!
This is the head of the Alchemists, Simon. He's known Geppetto for a long time, and that can't be a good thing, but he explains that they disagreed on what the petrification disease could unlock. Simon thought it could strengthen mankind and open a door to a new world. Victor thought the same, and now Victor's dead. In his warped thinking, the alchemist asks me what I think their cure has created. I tell no lies. He has created monsters. But he insists and postulates that the disease is actually a process that purifies a person's essence, where once purified, the human will be evolved. And then he drops a revelational bomb. That human essence is Ergo. The Ergo that I've been grinding and leveling up with, the Ergo inside of monsters and inside of puppets, were previous humans. They have the life energy of dead humans. My train of thought is derailed as Simon challenges me to come to the Alchemist's island, which is dumb to me, because if they don't want anyone to stop their plans, why tell me where they are? I mean, even if you're sure that you're going to succeed, why take the chance at all and tell me where I can find you? Anyways, back to what I was thinking. With this new information, we can understand that puppets are powered by the Ergo of humans. They carry memories, emotions, even fragments of consciousness. That's what allows puppets like me, like Pinocchio, to awaken an ego, a sense of self. And that also might explain why the puppet frenzy happened in the first place, why the Grand Covenant failed, because the more human the puppets became, the harder it was to keep them under control. This would mean that the people who loved their puppet daughters or wives or made friends with Robocops weren't delusional, they were onto something. And the Ergo inside of me, Geppetto's dead son. But something else I still don't understand is Romeo. Was he really controlling the puppets, and why would he cause the revolution? Finding Sophia near a statue in the exhibition, she explains why she woke us up in the first place, to stop Simon and save Krat. But then again, if our father Geppetto put his dead son's Ergo inside of us, why did he leave and abandon us in the train? Why didn't he just wake us up? Sophia continues about her powers, how the Ergo reached out to her, trying to tell somebody that it was once human. And then we learn that the gold coin tree was actually another one of the alchemists' fucked up experiments. You see, these trees are actually previous humans. They were made from humans. The alchemists saw them as tools, and Sophia says they might make her make another tree for them, or even something worse. Continuing the conversation, she reveals and confirms some of my theories about the disease, the frenzy, and what she names the carcass monsters. But she goes further. Way further. She explains that Ergo isn't only energy or fuel. It is condensed human life, pulled straight from the victims of the petrification disease. That means Every time somebody dies from the infection, their memories, their lifespan, and also fragments of their soul are being extracted and crystallized into something reusable. In the eyes of the alchemists, their death isn't the end. It's something for them to harvest. That is sick. But then everything starts to click into place. This is why the puppets sometimes awaken, why they twitch like they remember something that isn't theirs, why if you look at Pinocchio sometimes when he's just standing still, he twitches. They are echoing the memories of the dead, trapped in their cores. Maybe that's why the puppet frenzy started, because these souls aren't resting. They're still conscious, aware, and now they're imprisoned in mechanical bodies, trapped and forced to serve. Or even worse, if I am understanding this correctly, injected back into infected people, causing them to mutate. It's some jacked up stuff, but at this point with the hubris of man, I'm not even surprised. Connecting notes and dialogue, the petrification disease was first uncovered in a mine near Krat. Its true origin unknown, although I think it is the crowd material I mentioned earlier. The alchemists quickly traced the petrification disease to prolonged exposure to Ergo. Now, once Simon Manus realized what Ergo could do, he seized the moment. He pushed to flood the city with Ergo in everything, from whatever tech used Ergo to even puppets that served and were all around Krat, under the guise of progress. He did this to accelerate the disease, because now Ergo was everywhere throughout the city. Everyone was basically exposed to the Ergo on an everyday basis, and so every infected citizen became another source of Ergo, more death and material. It is a vicious cycle. But what were the alchemists trying to do? They were trying to force human evolution, and in Simon's twisted vision, the disease was just part of the equation. Because with enough Ergo, he could reshape mankind and build something stronger, maybe even immortal. Romeo tried to stop them, but he and his puppet army failed, and this explains why we saw the puppets and the carcass monsters fighting back at the cathedral. And as promised, I will explain what the puppets said back then. Not verbatim, but they said to defend the humans, fight the monsters, and fight for the king. So it's time for us to finish what the king and the king's men started. Finding the Stalker brother and sister, the fox explains that her little brother is going blind. They ask me for some gold coin fruit and I give it to them, but before leaving, she hints that they've been working for the Alchemists. Before hopping on the train, Venigni explains that he knows a way to get to the Alchemist's Isle, but that in order to power the vessel needed, I have to go get golden Ergo, and I can find one in the barren swamp. Great. Slogging our way through the puppet graveyard, we hear Alidoro talking out loudly to himself. He curses the alchemists over some bargain that they made, but then talks of not caring about the hotel people. So what did he do? I have to go back to the hotel and make sure everything is okay. Checking in on Antonia, her petrification disease seemed to be getting worse. I mean, look at her face. My skin is crawling. I have tyrophobia, so this is close enough for me. But she points to the giant portrait she's been staring at this whole time, and that used to be her. She asks me if I think she still looks like she used to. Of course, I tell her the truth. There is nothing left. Even without the disease, age comes for us all. Stepping outside to talk with her butler, he reveals that he has awoken. He thinks and is. He's developed feelings for Antonia. He is in love with her, but is at odds ends because he's a puppet, and he's never heard of a puppet and a human falling in love. However, in light of learning that puppets have the essence of humans within them, I think it's real and valid enough. So he asks me if I've ever met a puppet who's loved a human, and technically I have not, since I met the husband of the dead puppet wife, but I feel like that still counts, so I tell him that I have. For the first time, I told a lie, and it felt good. And the butler appreciates me, even though I was lying. He preferred this over the truth. And moving over to talk with Venigni, he explains that Geppetto was the one who created the Grand Covenant and that he himself made it work. So, in every puppet is a sort of conscience, and sometimes they awaken and develop individuality. Still, he and I don't know why the puppet frenzy happened at all. I mean, sure, awakened egos might have contributed to the event, but there's gotta be something else. He refers to Romeo being able to get around the Grand Covenant. How? And how was he also able to use the Ergo wavelengths to do what he did with all the other puppets' consciousnesses. He asks some really good questions. Does an awakened conscience break the covenant, or did somebody lift the covenant and cause the frenzy? Which I think he is alluding to Geppetto. And then Venigni used the word lift. And if only he and Geppetto knew its inner workings and Venigni is here questioning the situation, then that means... well, I mean, did Geppetto control Romeo and cause the puppet frenzy? If so, why? Pulling up to Eugenie, she asks us to give Alidoro some gloves and that he would know the significance. Oh, that's right. I came back here in the first place because Alidoro was spouting on about the Alchemists and I thought he might have betrayed us. But all conditions look normal currently, so I go to talk to my father. Showing him the portrait that we found back at the Monad house, it represents memories of a happier time to him, and so he decides to hang it up in his office, but why does the boy in the picture look so sad? Anyway, look, I have the same clothes as he does from the portrait, which of course makes sense. I mean, I am Geppetto's son, or at least his essence powers my body. Back at the swamp, Pino gives Alidoro the gloves, and he doesn't remember who Eugenie is, nor does he remember saving her. In fact, he is utterly disgusted by the gloves as they don't fit. I mean, what a dick. Then he says out loud that he never liked her, how she was just like him. Immediately, he remembers he's talking out loud and then he catches himself. So I'm starting to think he isn't the real Alidoro. Now, when I go back and report to Eugenie, she is astonished by something that doesn't fit. The glove was custom made for Alidoro, who should have a missing finger, but Alidoro said it didn't fit because he's got all of his fingers. When the Alidoro that she knew saved her, he ended up losing a finger in that act. So whomever this con man isn't Alidoro. For now, we're going to have to table this because we need to find that golden Ergo. However, as we're about to cross this bridge, everything begins to shake. Jiminy states that it came all the way from Krat Central Station. Something big is happening over there, but we've got to focus on the task at hand. Finding a Sentry notebook, we learn about a green thing, a monster created by the Alchemists, here in the swamp. It feasts on discarded puppets, eating their Ergo and then growing into monstrous proportions. Honestly, what the hell were the Alchemists thinking? Why did they make this creature? As is the norm, Swamp Thing enters his second form. After beating the creature, we obtain the golden Ergo that was attached to this giant puppet. After leaving the swamp, we have to check out that explosion at Krat Central Station. Now, Sophia says there was an Ergo amplification effect pointing to the Alchemist's scheming, where I first woke up in the game. Now there is a note on the desk, I believe is written by Geppetto, saying that he perfected the greatest puppet, and then trails off about a boy. So, Geppetto was in here. What I don't understand again is why didn't he just activate us in the beginning? Why did Sophia have to raise us? Heading deeper into the city, we discover that it's collapsing. Jutting out from the ground are what appear to be Ergo spires, the source of the ruptures and fissures, and if that wasn't enough, the carcasses have invaded. Finding a book, we learn that about 30 years ago, Krat used to be just a small fishing village. Heading up, we fight a boss called the Walker of Illusions, and as far as I can tell, she bleeds blue and can function separately than a regular carcass. So I think she's a hybrid, like Victor. I'm not really sure what to call them, enhanced humans, mutants. But all of this still isn't the worst of it, because Sophia telepathically tells us that everyone in the hotel is in danger. But that's when Simon's voice suddenly interjects, as he's figured out that Sophia's been talking to me through Ergo. Of course, he spouts some general villain talk, and after beating a corrupted parade master, we head through the hotel doors. Inside, it's been ravaged and ransacked, and yet Sophia stands elegant and untouched. She says the Stalkers, the brother and sister Fox and Cat, and the Black Rabbits did this. They also man-napped Geppetto. And she thinks that Simon is behind this. Of course, I believe the same thing, but now I also know what Alidoro was saying back at the swamp. He was in on this the whole time, and I knew that I should have sent him to the factory instead. Upstairs, everyone turned out to be just fine, as they were barricaded inside of Geppetto's office. And I think it's weird Geppetto was taken at all, because he's always in here. Like, everybody had time to run up and barricade themselves in, but Geppetto stepped out of his own office. Something doesn't add up. Going back downstairs to talk with Venigni, something he mentioned caught my attention. He says, the tragedy of Arlecchino must remain a one-time performance. Who is Arlecchino? And then I go to talk to Sophia, who warns us about the Isle of Alchemists and how it's like hell, revealing that she escaped from there, but that the true reason she woke us up wasn't completely altruistic. So we were just a tool, and helping Krat was just something along the way. However, she says that she's ready for us to see the real her. So, playing the piano, it opens up a secret passageway where Antonia's defaced portrait is, and heading beneath the hotel, we find ourselves in a vast cavern. Deeper inside, a phone rings. And I'm not sure what a telephone is doing all the way down here, but the Riddler asks us another question. Am I a killer? I tell the truth, and he gives us a key, saying that we're going to be seeing him pretty soon. Pushing into the cave, we find the Black Rabbits again, who seek their revenge.
Accept your fate. Death has come for you.
I think it's crazy because they stepped to me and they're mad that their brother is dead because of it. Like, I guess if they've been working for the Alchemists this whole time, but still, money isn't worth dying for. Unless I'm missing something. And I think I am, because soon, busting from the coffin is their big dead brother. Their little brother reveals that the Alchemist brought him back to life. Well, they reanimated him, at the very least. It doesn't matter. They all fall the same before the might of the puppet. Finding Alidoro, he reveals that he's been lying this whole time. You don't say. But he tells us his M.O. He was scheming with the Alchemist to find a way out of Krat. He's actually his old partner who killed him and took his identity. Alidoro was great at helping people, but at the cost of not making money. Consequently, the two would argue, and he killed him. Originally, and fittingly, his name was Parrot, copycat. But then he gives another big detail. Alidoro, the real one, was Eugenie's brother. And this actually explains a lot, and I can't wait to tell her. Now, normally I would kill this guy, but I was still trying to be good, and so I let him live. At first. And the reason I changed my mind is because I remembered he was a con man, and he was probably smack-talking in his head about me right now. So, dressing up to look like him, his true colors come out. At first, he laughs, thinking that because I'm a puppet, I can't hurt him, and then he calls me an idiot before telling me to shut up and buy something. I mean, you see what I mean here? Real eyes, real lies, real lies. Dancing on his body, he notes how I am like a human. Summoning a submarine, we Sharkpedo onto the shores of Alchemist Isle, and here we find Sophia, who explains that she was never really at the hotel, she was just an illusion, and the real her is on this island in the Upper Abbey. Simon turned her and her powers into a tool, causing her insurmountable pain. I don't even know what kind of torture that would be to have your soul split, but I do know the pain of being used. Sophia used us as a tool, just as she was used. The real reason she guided us was to save her, not Krat. I gotta say, I haven't been this used by a woman since Songbird used me back in Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty. But, she just continues saying that because of all the raging ergo around the beach, we're probably going to be seeing after images of memories. Extending the dialogue, she reveals her full name is Sophia Monad, daughter of Valentinus, and Simon was actually his right-hand man who used the powers that she gained to manipulate time to achieve his goals. Her powers of time control explain why I can die 103 times in a single playthrough and keep coming back. Walking along the sands, we begin to see those after images that she was talking about. A boy whining to his mother, pining for his father to return, but only told to play with his new friend Romeo. Which gets me thinking, what happened to Geppetto's wife and how did she die? Another memory, two boys talking about training to become stalkers, which reminds me of the Monad Charity House where we learned that kids could get vocational training to become stalkers, so I wonder if these boys were from there. The following memory is of Romeo talking to another boy who at this point I'm just straight up convinced is us, but for some reason the name Pinocchio that I've been going by this far doesn't feel right. In fact, what is my name? Because I don't think anybody's called me by my name so far. However, the boy talks about his father who didn't show up to his graduation, and so the neglected boy says that he could just die. Soon they find a woman they would call a legendary stalker, begging her to teach them how to fight, but she dismisses them and orders Jiminy to take them away. And then we move a little bit further, finding a darker memory, where the boy is face down in the ground with the legendary stalker in disbelief, and she apologizes and she wishes that she got there sooner. Her voice begins to trail off, saying if she had known that this would have happened, and that's kind of it, which gets me thinking, how did I die? How did Geppetto's son die? After slogging my way over to the Abbey and defeating a giant door guardian, I take a break and I tell you, Jenny, what actually happened to Alidoro. But it's absolutely bullcrud that we can't tell her that the real one was her brother. I mean, I feel like that's a big piece of information, right? So why would the devs purposely leave that out? Is there future content that's going to go over this, tie into this? But back at the Abbey, we find a book talking about somebody named Camille. Camille was turned into a maid puppet, and at some time and place, she even saved a baby who fell from their crib, and she fought off a dragon who came through a black hole. Kidding. But the astounding thing was her capacity to act and save the baby at all. Those actions weren't in her coding. Studying the very first puppet to have an awakened ego, they received a message from her saying, "Send me back to my child." And then they interrogated Camille, taking her apart and learning that with this discovery, humankind could open the door to immortality. Going further inside, we would find a puppet wired to the wall. Talking to him, we finally come face to face with the king of riddles, Arlecchino. This was the name that Venigni mentioned earlier when he said the tragedy of Arlecchino must not be repeated. But then this obliterated puppet explains that he knows the alchemists are scheming their way into corrupted immortality. The way he says all this makes me realize that this guy's not on anybody's side. In fact, listening to him speak, he's unhinged. From word to word, the variations in his intonations and tone go from jest to murderous. He asks us one more riddle. Are we human or puppet? I wasn't really expecting that question, so I just said puppet, which pains him, as he believes that after all the bloodshed I put out into the world, calling myself a puppet would be shackling myself. And then he speaks to the core of the game's message about humanity.
So disappointing! After coming so far, enduring so much, doing so much, killing and maiming and saving and loving, why in the name of blessed Ergo would you shackle yourself once more, huh? Please. You know it as well as I do, as we all do. We are human. We may live within the medium of Ergo and bodies of wood and metal, but we are human beings. We live. We think, we love, we hate. We are alone, like all human beings.
He knows the truth. He knows about Ergo and takes it further by talking about how they imprisoned us inside of puppets. Now, While Arlecchino talks about revenge for what they did to the puppets, he then shows how psychotic he actually is. I mean, this guy starts talking and spouting on about how blood and revenge are the only thing that drive him, how fun it is. And so I ask him, are you a serial killer? But he prefers to be called a blood artist. I mean, are you hearing this guy? I don't know what to say. So then I start asking him how he was able to even make all of those telephone calls. And he refers to Sophia as a goddess who has a lot of ergo, and with all of it floating around here, he somehow siphons some of it to kill his boredom. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would go mental too if I was trapped like that perpetually. I mean, who knows how long he's been there, and who knows how much longer he's going to stay there. But, I don't know, this game just has so many questions, like so many puzzles. Arlecchino, Venigni, the serial killer, I'm still trying to figure out how the two are connected. But, hold on, there was that journalist's book from earlier. And so I've got this feeling that Arlecchino at some point was that killer made of steel who murdered Venigni's parents. I mean, he doesn't look like it right now, but I wonder what he looked like before. He's giving Joker vibes. Moving along, finding the black cat, he stands ready to fight, to stop me from getting to his sister. But, giving him a gold coin fruit, I was able to spare his life. But now, it's time to fight the next boss. I wonder if she is one of those few mutated humans who actually survived the quote-unquote purification process. But after a while of being mollywopped by her, I finally knock her into her second phase.
Oh, Simon. Your sword, Vexasia, swears to protect this tower.
Hey, what color was the sky, bro? After I impale her and Spectre smacks her in the face, we finally beat her.
Sir Simon, only you with the one.
After that, we find the real Sophia.
Save me.
Oh, God.
It hurts so much. I want to be free.
She laments about how much pain she's in, and she wants to be released. I don't know what they were doing to her, but my god, it is disgusting. Sophia's body is just dissolving into this puddle of glistening organic slime riddled with holes like it's been eaten from the inside out. And then she's got these blue butterflies all over her like a decaying dress, as if it were her cocoon. Her arms are stretched out, with skin and fingers peeling into strands that cling like rotting webs. I mean, just describing it doesn't even do it. It's like she's being digested by the chair. However, it's also kind of quiet here. Undisturbed, serene even, although it is still horrifically unnatural. Beautiful wrought in slow motion. And she's in a cage, so I notice the symbolism here. Of course, I've got to get her out. She's got to go. I mean, I can't look anymore. It's killing me. I almost forget that she's been using me this whole time. But I give her peace, and I end her perpetual pain. Looking at the wall, we see the note, my blue fairy, but we still have to keep going. And so we go back to the hotel to check in with everybody, and Venigni has actually discovered a message from Romeo. In the message, Romeo says the name Carlo, and then he talks about the Grand Covenants and how they have to obey their creator. But then he says the one thing that changes everything. The creator is Geppetto. But I guess also that's kind of weird because I thought everybody knew that already. Geppetto created the puppets and Venigni helped manufacture them en masse. Together they inscribed the Grand Covenant. It doesn't really seem like a revelation when I say this out loud, but then Venigni begs me to know what was said as he couldn't hear it. He restates that they need to find the cause of the puppet frenzy, and then it all clicks for him. Geppetto was the one who caused the frenzy. Geppetto commanded Romeo to start the puppet revolution in Krat, but it still doesn't answer why he would do that. Continuing, we ask Venigni to decrypt Alidoro's message, and when we read it, we learn the real Alidoro kept his distance to protect his sister Eugenie as he was being chased, because he knew the truth about everything going on in Krat, the Ergo, the experiments, the puppets. But then he says, her real name is... And then it ends. Right there. What's Eugenie's real name? What is her real name? Does anybody know? Or is she just one of those things that's going to tie into a future game? And I'm trying to think of like South Korean Disney childhood stories even. I can't think of anything. But I guess we're just going to have to wait. After learning about Antonia's death, Polendina says he's going to erase his soul and just become a regular animatronic. Following that, we head back to the Abbey to meet with the Fox, who explains she just wanted to help her brother and doesn't actually feel like doing her job and killing us. Simon should have paid her more. Giving her a fruit, I let her live. Now, learning that our father has been lying, manipulating, and scheming this entire time, I was planning to walk right by him and leave him locked up. But I needed a key, and apparently he had it. He asks if I thought he was a trustworthy father. Without hesitation, I say no. And then he beats himself up over it like I could care. I needed you to care when I was a kid, not now when it's too late. He talks about being a real family when this is all over, and then he gives us a key. Heading up and taking time to appreciate the views as my arm twitches, the soul of Geppetto's son stirring within my body, I look out into the foggy horizon and remember I had something to do. So we head back to the path of the pilgrim, and then from behind us, a white butterfly glows and floats into view before leading us to that old stargazer, and taking out the chrysalis seems to reverse time around it. Kneeling before the bonfire, everything goes black. But, opening our eyes, we're surrounded by white. Heading through the snowy forest, I find a bunch of corrupted animals. Defeating them, finding new clothes, we walk forward to find the Krat Zoo, which baffles Jiminy, as he knows that the zoo burned down a long time ago. Heading to the zoo, we find that everybody here has been massacred, giving a new set of questions for us to ponder over. And I gotta say, I was really enjoying Lies of P just in it of itself for the first time I was playing it, but this DLC really added and elevated the story. I truly appreciate, as a gamer, the amount of detail that they've connected between the DLC and the base game. Moving through the entrance, I'm already speculating that the Alchemists are involved. We know that the petrification disease was spread by Simon, and we have seen corrupted animals before, but this is an entire zoo. Hoping to uncover more, we pull open the gates to the zoo, where Marchiona, puppeteer of death, makes her presence known. Looking around, we see bodies strewn about, strung up, and even one hung up on the mammoth's tusk. Upstairs and outside on the balcony, we find a dying stalker. He talks about a red-headed stalker with veneration. He says he was here for a bounty, and looking at the missing poster that he had, we see it was for Stalker Romeo. Somebody named Lea put out a reward for anyone who could help her find Romeo. Is this Romeo, king of puppets, the same one who was friends with Pinocchio as a boy? Romeo went here to the zoo for some reason, and now he's got people looking for him. Penetrating further in, shooting butterflies with my bow and arrows, Jiminy postulates that the Stargazer sent us back in time to when the zoo was still intact. I don't think it's far-fetched considering Sophia had time control powers, and I kind of associate Sophia with the butterflies, but the next question I want you to write down is why we were sent back here at all. Moving through the zoo, I find this absolutely horrifying nightmare, a mix of different animals, a corrupted chimera, if you will, just nasty. It was part elephant, zebra, giraffe, hyena. I think I even saw a deer and an ape in there too. Probably one of the hardest fights throughout the whole DLC. Maybe it was just me, but I was stuck there for quite some time. Going through the rest of Disney's Animal Kingdom, I fight a dinosaur, make our way through the greenhouse, defeat some of these robots from Atomic Heart, and then kill a mutant who was punching a dead animal. He drops a note, an emergency directive to look out for a puppet heading to Krat Zoo. This puppet, 1, is not me, but 2, is noted to be an extreme threat to the Order's plans. And this calls for Marchiona, as well as the Alchemists, to kill the puppet on sight. Entering Marchiona's room, we find a recording addressed to her from a woman. She's someone looking for her lost apprentice. She jokes about killing some of Marchiona's lackeys, but then says to consider it as payment for what happened to the other apprentice. She'll come back to collect that debt later. This was Lea Florence Monad. Jiminy is now irrevocably certain that they are in the past, as Lea Florence is the legendary stalker who disappeared somewhere in Krat a long time ago. Now, we just passed through the sands of time back on Alchemist Isle. Do you remember when we saw those images of the boys, Romeo and Pinocchio? They called the girl a legendary stalker. One thing I noticed is that back there they said a legendary stalker, not the legendary stalker, which makes me wonder if there was only one or if there were more. But what I can start connecting is that this is the Lea looking for Romeo, her apprentice. Considering the high probability that I was her other apprentice, and we saw that I was face down in the sand in the memory, paired with her message, I think we can start to theorize that Marchiona, or at least the Order, had something to do with my death. Also in this room, we see a red ribbon in a cage with a toy doll and a box with a red star on it. I wonder if that means anything. For now, it's time to meet Marchiona, Master Puppeteer.
I was told that murderous puppet had come to call on me. So who is this handsome guest standing before me? It matters not. You belong to me now.
I think that's pretty cool, how she uses that glove contraption on her hand to control the puppet. She also provides dialogue explaining how I wasn't the puppet she was expecting, which means there is that other puppet that was mentioned that everybody's looking for. After defeating Blue Mommy, she relents that it should have been Lea who killed her. Moving forward and entering a hall with red candles, it feels almost ritualistic, like someone was guiding us in.
Kill him.
Some serial killer murdered all these people and placed their bodies like this was some piece of art. They drenched them in red wax, and now I'm wondering if these candles are red because they're infused with blood. It is a demented sight to behold. And that woman was definitely Lea, looking for Romeo, picking up the monad crest, and it also looks like Romeo's coat was placed there on purpose. And it worked because she was heated, saying she would kill that bastard. Putting on Romeo's coat, we meet with Rose Aura. She tells us that she was locked in Marchione's cage, and this actually explains the red ribbon. She says she followed a white butterfly here, but that she lost her shoes during the endeavor. I think it's the same white butterfly from earlier that brought us into the past, but not sure. Because if that was Sophia, then what could she want with this girl? But she asks us to find her shoes and return them to her. While she's twitching, she talks about how she missed her precious friend from the Rose estate and how she needs to go back there. When I do find and bring her back her shoes, she gives me an old drawing, and looking at it, it's a little boy. But then we head up to the tram station, where we meet Goddard, the blind painter. She used to be a high-ranking alchemist who was dedicated to human evolution. She went blind due to a lab accident, meaning she could no longer work. However, it turned out to be a blessing for her because she found the path of truth through art. When she asks us what we think of her canvas, I tell her Aline did it better. She calls me ridiculous and banishes me. Well, fine, then. I'm going back to Dark Souls 3. Getting on the tram, arriving at our destination, and oh my god, there's a cute orange cat. My wife and I have an orange cat. His name is Whiskey. Comment Whiskey if you're still here. Spelled the Scottish way, not the Irish or American way, by the way. Trying to catch the little furball, we find ourselves in Hotel Krat before it was opened. Finding an old and crumpled letter with tear stains on it, it was addressed to Geppetto, informing him that his wife, Camille, died on the job due to a chemical leak. Signed, Valentinus Monad. But Camille, that was also the name of the puppet maid, so I wonder if they're the same people. Did they take Camille's Ergo and put her into that maid puppet? After admiring the kitty, I speak with the high-nosed Lumacchio, who might as well be Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3. Asking him what year it is, he condescends and doesn't answer, thinking I have the petrification disease and that I should go to the Rose Estate to find a cure. and I ask him about Romeo and then Lea, which leads us to the conversation of one known as the Blood Artist, a serial killer who was a tremendous threat for a while until Lea beat him and dismantled him. Speaking with a big and burly man named Klaus, I guess he could also be Santa Claus eventually, he speaks about how Lea saved him from the zoo. She carried him all the way over here. Then he talks about Pinocchio. He is the leader of the bastards, which explains the high brow. Asking him what year it is, he doesn't directly say, but then he notes that the grand exhibition is going to be cancelled, which gives us a small idea of how far we've come back. If I had to guess, I would say this DLC and the base game take place probably a few decades apart. Please correct me if I'm incorrect. Also, since I have you here, one question I do have, maybe any of you Lies of P experts can answer this. How long has the petrification disease and the puppet frenzy been going on? I mean, those two might be separate things that happened at different times, but I remember that crowd, that mineral that probably came from outer space, was discovered about 600 years ago. People died, Ergo was discovered, and the alchemists eventually figured out that when somebody does die from the petrification disease, their soul gets refined into Ergo, or they can extract their soul and turn it into Ergo. And that is where all of this starts to spiral, because the more the disease spread, the more Ergo was produced. The more Ergo they mined, the more crowd grew, because it's reactive to the Ergo, absorbing it like a parasite. So this means that the infection was biological and systemic. It was buried under the city, feeding off of death, off progress for the alchemists, off of everybody that the alchemists threw at it. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm certain this is half of what causes the spires to jut in Krat, causing the collapse of the city. But then came the puppets. They ran on Ergo, the essence of dead humans, and over time they started to feel and act of their own volition. Humans saw this. Geppetto and Venigni made the Grand Covenant, but Geppetto would later lift it and command Romeo and the puppets to start the frenzy. At this point in the video, Geppetto's reasons are still unknown, but circling back from my stream of recapping thoughts, this was all going on for how long, do you guys think? So far, I think the disease was going on for years, but the puppet frenzy was going on for a few months. Somebody please fact check me. Moving forward, we find a letter from Antonia to Geppetto, consoling him for the loss of his wife and his son, Camille and Carlo. From this, we learn that my name isn't Pinocchio, or more accurately, I think you guys know what I mean. The Ergo, the soul inside of the boy inside of me, was named Carlo. So, am I Carlo? This would line up with Romeo's dialogue from back then, but also connecting this letter with what Carlo said to Romeo about his father, we can start to guess that Geppetto was neglectful as a father, more focused on work than his son. So one distinction I think is important to take time and emphasize is that the real Carlo has his essence and likeness inside of me, but I don't quite know if that necessarily makes us exactly the same Carlo. We pretty much have everything about him, bar his memories, but does that mean we're different or the same? I still can't definitively say yes or no, but for the purpose of the rest of this video, I will be calling him Carlo, because he's Carlo enough for me currently, and that makes it easier for me to read and write this script. But if my thought process is incorrect or flawed, just let me know. I'll probably update my pinned comment if so. Heading down to what would become that secret passageway and cavern to get to the Alchemists in the future, now I know why there was a phone down there at all. Because there was an underground facility down here. At some point later on, it would be demolished. In our procession through the Alchemist's facility, eventually we would hear the screams of a woman as she bellowed over the corruption that she was facing. Veronique was the leader of the sweepers, the lower class of the Stalker faction, and I can't tell you how many times I heard her say, "Make it stop." In my nightmares, I still hear her repeating that over and over again. After hours of dying, I finally got lucky and put her on her knees. She apologizes for killing me multiple times and reveals that the cure the alchemists had given her for the petrification disease was what was causing her mind to burn. The purification process was corrupting her. She says, I need to make sure nothing ever leaves this facility. Nothing can be allowed to spread, and she warns about their test subject, Two-Faced Overseer. It sucks that we can't take her weapon, but moving on, we find one of the alchemists' sick experiments. They turned a little girl into one of those golden trees, and looking at her in one of these cases is Alidoro, but it's the real one. At least I think it's him. and he's going by the name of the Tracker. He's in search of a dangerous relic and the two-faced Overseer, both tied to the Alchemists and their twisted research. When talking about Lea, he hints about Carlo's death, continuing that Romeo was a strong fighter so he shouldn't have run into any issues, but further postulating that this could be an old enemy trying to get back at Lea. Moving on, we find a letter of reprimand, which states that the Alchemists were conducting an authorized experiment that led to the death of a listener, somebody like Sophia but not Sophia herself. The experiment tried to link this listener to what is known as the Great One's relic, but one particular thing to note here is that the listener who died was a family member of the head of the workshop union, Geppetto, who we just saw back at the hotel, received a letter from Valentinus, head of the Alchemists. Camille, Carlo's mom, Geppetto's wife, was that listener, and the Alchemists covered it all up, saying it was a chemical leak. And now that I'm reading this, I wonder if Goddard the blind painter, back near the tram, was one of the scientists in the lab working with Camille. And mention of a Great One's relic, I wonder if this is somehow connected to the old, unknowable ancient ones like Cthulhu and Lovecraftian horror. I mean, this game does give Bloodborne vibes at times, and it would explain so much of the terrifying corruption happening in this world. After smashing through the facility, we face the two-faced Overseer. At first, I had the plan to aura farm and make it look like a cinematic fight, but then my plan went sideways when his bone axe hit me sideways. I immediately remembered, thankfully, that I could summon Alidoro, and I blew the horn. He easily burst through the window, breaking glass and bending steel. Just in the nick of time, he was able to draw the boss's attention away from me. I thought the two-faced Overseer was interesting. I mean, his boss design was interesting. A kind of early version of mutants like Victor or the Walker of Illusions. However, this one seems to have somebody's head in a vat attached to what I think is the body of an ancient warrior that Alidoro talked about. Eventually, his head blows up, and Alidoro commends us, saying our fighting style looks similar to somebody that he knows.
I need more time. I'm coming, Romeo. I swear I won't be late. Not again. Not like I was with Carlo.
Hot on Lea's trail, we find Lumacchio, who knows what happened to Veronique down in the facility, but he inquires about if she said anything. Against my better nature, remembering that I'm still trying to be good, I tell him the truth, that we need to find Lea, who's headed to the Rose Estate. He mentions a tram that we could take to get there, here in this place where, as he puts it, all Ergo we use comes from. Is this where the crowd was found? Descending down below and finding a carcass that devours puppets, I realized that this would become the Swamp Thing from the future in the puppet graveyard. After we defeat it, it scurries away, living to die another day. Even deeper in the mines, we find Rosora. It seems like she's dying. She asks for Ergo, and without even thinking, I hand over the biggest chunk I have. So she starts dancing, she's lively again, she's thrilled, and then she hands me a reward, one of her treasures, a secret gathering invitation from the Alchemists. This was a meeting meant for the highest members of society, inviting them to the Devil's Pit to witness some kind of ancient altar buried deep within the Ergo veins. But here's the part that stops me cold. It's addressed to Carlo Geppetto, me. Why would they invite a kid to something like this? And could this be connected to how Carlo died in the first place? Looking at another drawing that she gave us, I think that's Geppetto. I come across a brain in a vat. He's mid-existential crisis, slowly realizing he no longer has a body. He's just a consciousness now, floating in a tube, and even that's falling apart. The vat he's in is leaking Ergo, which means he's dying, whether he wants to or not. He starts questioning everything, wondering if he even counts as alive if he doesn't have a body. Then, in a moment of grim clarity, he says the only thing that he has left is freedom to choose when he dies. And so he asks me, to end it for him. Little ironic, coming from someone who just declared that his future is in his hands to decide. He leaves this world by stating his name, Alexander Goodman, inventor and first successful subject of the Mind Keeper machine. I wonder if this would tie into the Walker of Illusions. And this gets me thinking, how many real-world inventions came with hidden consequences like this? Things that were meant to help or advance society, or did, but quietly caused harm behind the scenes. Whether it's new technology, medicine, or energy sources, progress has always seemed to come at a cost. Take nuclear energy for an example. It's clean, it doesn't harm the environment, but also it has led to catastrophes like nuclear bombs or Chernobyl. We don't always see the tragedy right away, but it is there, just like in Krat, buried under all the innovation. Also buried here was this massive stone face carved right into the cavern wall. For a second, I couldn't tell if it was something ancient or alien. Maybe there was a whole forgotten civilization that was here long before this pit was even found. But, pushing on ahead, we come to stand before our next boss. Fighting Ludwig the anguished guardian of the ruins. I wonder what his story is. He seemed to be cocooned down here for a long time, but also a bit humanoid, so makes me wonder if he was a previous human. Probably another one of the Alchemist's horrors. After burning and slashing him, he falls. With no option but to go forward, we find Lea's camp, where she leaves a recorded cipher asking for whoever finds Romeo to take care of him and tell him to be happy. However, we also find Arlecchino's invitation. Arlecchino. The puppet stuck to the wall on Alchemist Isle was named Arlecchino. The one mentioned by Venigni. Actually, now that you mention it, it does make sense. We did ask him if he was a serial killer, and he did say he was a blood artist, plus his voice in this recording, it's obviously him. He angrily states that he's mad about how she messed him up the last time they met. Arlecchino wants revenge, and he intends to hit her where it hurts, by hurting her apprentice. This explains why Romeo went missing. Arlecchino took him, and now they're at the Rose estate. Outside, I take time to admire this orchestra, this symphony of colors dancing across the sky. Then, I make my way across the ice and through ships until I open a door.
How in the world are you still alive? You really are one of the luckiest fellows I've ever met. All that effort to stop you down the drain. Proud of yourself?
Lumacchio reveals something I never expected. He was a bad guy, all along. Who manipulated Veronique and Lea and tried to kill them both. He was working for Simon this whole time, hoping to achieve the quote-unquote gift the alchemists offer to the world. Lumacchio kicked my butt for a while, so I decided to take a break from him, and I looked around and found an old fisherman named Salau. For those of you who read The Old Man and the Sea when you were in primary school, this is an obvious nod to that book. This fisherman's name is Salau, derivative of the Spanish word salado, meaning unlucky. He's the last fisherman of Krat, and I'm reminded that before Krat even became an industrial, superpowered city, it was a small and humble fishing village. He's here, exhausted after fighting this fish for 3 days and 3 nights, but finally catching it. He asks us to find Manolin back in the village. In the original book, Manolin is the boy who helped the old man, and he was also his mentee. We are tasked with letting the boy know that he caught the fish and he's ready for a brewski. I'll get that for him later if I remember to, just hold on, old man. Eventually, I would try my hand at fighting Lumacchio again, and mid-fight, after drinking something the alchemist gave him for his contributions, he would evolve, more like mutate, into this monster. After throwing a little shock bomb at him, he falls, and I take this time to really appreciate the hard work and luck that went into getting this guy bent. I died so many times, but I remember feeling extraordinarily relieved when I gave him the business. He grovels for mercy, confused as to why he didn't become the enhanced human he thought he would become. The alchemist omitted the fact that he would turn into a monster in order to gain his perceived power. Extracting more information, he explains that before Simon took over, Valentinus was in charge. While he was, Lea was off limits. But eventually she and Simon would butt heads, and without Valentinus, Simon would place a bounty on her head. Leaving him to suffer, we find a madman's journal that talks about the devil's method. I think this relates to the devil's pit, the mine that we were just in, but it's easy to ascertain that this was actually Geppetto's journal. He learned a few things about Ergo. Firstly, the body he extracts Ergo from must be relatively fresh and had to have been produced before death, but most importantly, the vessel in which the Ergo is placed into must resemble the subject. Although he does talk about one missing key ingredient. He considers his grief as karma for working with the alchemists. He laments over what his wife said, to bring her back to her child, maybe to let her soul rest so that she could be with Carlo. But then Geppetto would promise to make his singular purpose to resurrect Carlo, which explains why this puppet, this Tin Man, looks exactly like Carlo. After grabbing the beer from the top of the lighthouse, I go outside and I spot the Rose Estate in the distance. Something ominous awaits. But then I hear a little girl's voice. It's Rosara. She found the estate, but she doesn't want to go in because, as she puts it, it's full of sadness. She misses her friend, but she says she's glad to have me now. She gives me a sketch of a tree from Krat City Hall and another piece of a larger drawing. I really wish she would just hand over the whole thing already because I want to know who this girl is. Judging by the paintings of Carlo and Geppetto, I feel like she's connected somehow to them. And it's the Monad House, the Rose Estate. Carlo was here, and her focus right now is to get over there. Giving the old man his beer, I tell him that everybody in the village is dead, probably murdered by Arlecchino. I didn't say that part to him, but he dies almost immediately after. Back at the village, following a trail of red petals, we find the legendary Stalker.
Who are you? You look familiar. Wait. This is Romeo's locket.
After showing Lea, who has the petrification disease, Romeo's locket and explaining that Alidoro sent us, she trusts us enough to share how guilty she feels because, in her eyes, she failed 2 apprentices. She was too late to save Carlo, but she feels driven to not let the same fate befall Romeo. Lea says Arlecchino is the one causing havoc and killing everyone around Krat, as he holds a grudge against her for the last fight. She ponders about the ego of a murderer inside of a puppet, and now I can't stop thinking about that. Who was Arlecchino's Ergo before it was put inside of him? And who created Arlecchino? Agreeing to help Lea in her quest to find Romeo, she explains that she only barely beat Arlecchino last time, so our help is sorely needed. Along the way, she notices my skills and says I must have had a great teacher. Then later she says my stance and the way I move is familiar. After taking time to draw art in the snow, we kill more enemies, and Lea can't get the gnawing feeling out of her head. She swears we've met before. However, with the Monad charity house in sight, we run up on its gates. When she opens the door, the petrification disease causes her to fall to the wall. She'll catch up later, and stepping over the bodies of the slain, Jiminy realizes that this is probably the Monad charity house tragedy, the incident that was covered up and just blamed on the petrification disease. The truth is, Arlecchino happened.
Not you. Not like this. This wasn't supposed to happen. Romeo.
Finding Romeo's arms out like that just looks like it was stretched out. That's sick. However, the King of Riddles also left Romeo's letter for Lea, telling her not to worry about him going to the zoo, and a bloody photo of Romeo strung up. The music here in this scene is highly emotionally charged. Also, there is a photo of Kid Carlo here. Exhausting Lea's dialogue, she just does her best to try to convince herself that Romeo will be okay, that he didn't deserve this horror, and that she needs to get up. Finding a note upstairs about a murder puppet, we see details that the Alchemists were running experiments, trying to perfect the appearance of human thought and behavior. This was the second experiment, named Puppet A, likely for Arlecchino. I wonder who the first was. Maybe it was Camille? Or Rosora? The Alchemists thought that A could be useful for Simon, and later they would discover the dismantled remains of Arlecchino after Lea smashed him to bits, but they would fully repair him, and now he's on the loose. This explains why Arlecchino seems to have animosity towards the Alchemists, because they made him. I guess this also explains how and why he ended up being trapped on the Isle, and why this incident was covered up. The Alchemists were trying to keep their experiments and their mistake in creating a murder puppet that they couldn't control a secret. Pretty soon I would find a petition addressed to Valentinus, urging him to stop Simon, because he had taken the ergo of a deranged, merciless killer and implanted it into a puppet, all in the name of research. Shortly after that, we would find Sophia's room, and on her bed a picture of Lea, Romeo, and Carlo titled My Happy Family. Reading her diary, she talks about how the petrification disease had petrified everybody with fear, and this was despite her father ordering a quarantine. But then she refers to the sudden loss of somebody so precious, marking that Romeo and presumably Lea were profoundly hurt by this loss as well. I'm sure this is Carlo, although I still don't think the disease killed him, because the way she describes it is that this happened suddenly. But the disease is a slow killer. Plus, Lea on the beach talked about how she wished she got back sooner. Plus that stuff with Marchiona, and the fact that Carlo was invited to the Devil's Pit. I don't know, I wonder why they make his death so vague. At the bottom, Sophia says that Simon asked her to meet at the harbor, but she doesn't know what for. However, you and I already know how that turns out. Coming across another letter, this time, Geppetto was writing to Antonia. He confesses to the folly of his ways, how he was blinded by the praise obsessed with being seen as a genius, and how Venigni's rising success made him feel threatened. He confesses, losing his wife left him hollow and he's no longer the same person that he was before, but also from that emptiness came the one thing that still drives him until now, the need to reunite with his son. He explains that he tried to protect Carlo by keeping him at a distance, sending him to grow up at the Monad house. He knows it was selfish to orphan him, but he insists that it was better than raising him as a broken man, because in his eyes, at least at Monad, Carlo would have Antonia, Sophia, Romeo, and Lea, people who could give him what Geppetto couldn't. Sounds like the easy way out, the selfish way out, and the way that you take when you don't want to take responsibility or make changes, but sure. Pressing further into the house, we would eventually come into a big room, ruined and bloodied. This was Valentinus's room, and here we find another letter from Lea. Reading it, we would discover that she was taken in and raised at the Rose estate. However, she would eventually leave and abandon her loyalty to the house and to her father when she couldn't bear what the alchemists were doing anymore. Arlecchino had massacred everybody, murdering her father and mother, and looking at this family portrait, I think Lea and Sophia were sisters. The canvas notes that in the painting, they are eternal. Flashback to Clair Obscure Expedition 33. Hidden in a secret room, we find what looks to be an ancient stone slab with the shape of an arm carved into it, connected to some kind of containment chamber. Whatever arm rested here once is long gone, but we see the Ergo remnants. Finding another letter, showing that Valentinus loved his family, refusing to let them go, refusing to choose them over the alchemist, we also see that he gave the Great One's arm to somebody, and as a consequence he was excommunicado from his position as leader of the alchemists. On top of that, it writes that a sea monster is on his way to kill him. I think this was a letter from Simon. Now, I don't know if he sent some type of monstro or an actual sea monster, or if he was talking about Arlecchino. With the Rose State behind me, as I walk forward and ascend the steps, hearing the cries and clanks of battle, stepping across the blood-soaked snow, it is time to meet this infamous puppet we've heard so much about.
Where's the legend I faced before?
Shut up, you filthy puppet!
Oh, no. I must ask. Did you actually believe you could save your beloved apprentice? Pathetic! And who might you be?
At first, I wanted to make this as cinematic as I could, slowly stepping calm, cool, collected to meet the blood artist on the red waters, and I even used Romeo's weapon for extra theatrics, but I didn't do too hot. Eventually, I discovered I could help Lea up and we could fight him together, which helped out quite a bit. But it did more than that, because it provided extra dialogue, not just from Lea, but from Arlecchino. And she has like the coolest moveset in this game. The coolest special attack, if you want to call it that. I hope I can get her weapon because I can't wait to abuse that move as well. Soon enough, Lea knocks him into his second form.
This is exactly what I've been waiting for! This pain! The Alchemists offered me
He screams the alchemists offered only boredom to him, so I think he tried to kill them all, only to end up sealed in the wall, condemned to eternal boredom. By our combined powers, we went to town in Arlecchino, together to victory.
Thank you. It's yours now. All this time, I wondered why you look so familiar. Now I know.
Waking up back in our time, now we know about the events that led up to this moment. Also, we discover what happened to Romeo. He wasn't dead yet, but when Geppetto rolled up with that ominous box, we know how he becomes the king of puppets, and I can't wait to do New Game Plus to see his dialogue. But one question I still have is Lea. When, where, and how did she die exactly? I mean, I know the disease was getting to her, but did Geppetto kill her? Was she okay with Romeo being killed and puppified? If she did die, quietly, where? Going back in time, one last time, we find Lea's secret room in the hotel. Listening to the recording meant for Carlo, she expresses how she was broken after cutting ties with her family, but found to love Romeo and Carlo in a way. She also talks about how she wishes that she could have appreciated their time together more. She regrets ever leaving, and especially not realizing the value of their shared bond until he was dead. In her room was also a canvas of her and her boys, a memory of happier days. No longer able to bear the emotional weight of being here, I head back to my time to face Simon at the top of the tower.
Is it not magnificent? Distilled immortality and a key that opens a world with no lies. A key that unlocks true evolution. Give thanks. Ergo is a gift from me, Simon Manus, who will transgress even God. Bow down to your God, who will be born now!
God, this guy's disgusting to look at. Mangled and everything. He spouts on about transcending into godhood, but he looks like he's in torment. And it doesn't get better, because soon I smack him into his second phase.
This is evolution. Behold, as I discard this fragile body. Witness me as I grasp the power of a true God. I'm not the only one that saw that, right? Is not just me, right, chat? That did look like, anyways, soon, I beat the puny god off, and he says that he's jelly that Sophia had done so much for me, and now I wonder if he had feelings for her. He asks what I did to her, and I tell him that I gave her peace. He goes on about how his ability to read minds was painful, but that Sophia was able to ease his pain, and that's part of why he wanted her. Which is weird, because that's your colleague's daughter, but okay, sure. I guess that's not the weirdest thing that you've done, but he admits that he couldn't have her, so he forced her to stay with him using the power. But then he drops something called the Arm of God. I am 97% sure that this was the one that was in that slab back at the Rose estate, and so now I have a theory of how Carlo died. I think Valentinus gave Carlo the arm and told him to run off with it or something, but then the alchemists caught him and they killed him. Or maybe Arlecchino caught him and killed him, and that's how they got the arm back. But don't quote me on that, that's just an idea, a theory I had. But let me know if you think it's legit or not. Reading the description confirms a few things. This was the Great One's relic that was referred to, the one that the alchemists found and lost when Valentinus gave it away. Going below, we find Geppetto, who's happy we succeeded as now I would be able to come back to life, he says. What does he mean? I'm alive enough, I think. And then it hit me. He wants to make me human. The Arm of God, the Great One's relic, that was a key item that Geppetto needed from the alchemists, from Simon. And now that he's dead, he's got it because I brought it to him. I was just the tool. And his vast supply of Ergo, it all converges here. That is what he was going to use to fuel this process. but the final ingredient, the one that he wrote in his book, was my heart. I don't fully understand. Geppetto makes this puppet. He makes me. He puts Carlo's Ergo inside of me. What did he need me to do all this for? Like, why was I going around this entire game? What was his MO? Did he need me just to kill a bunch of people and grab a few things to fill my heart with experience and Ergo to give it, I don't know, quote-unquote substance for lack of a better term? Was lying and telling truths giving me humanity to make my organ capable of becoming human? In fact, the puppet frenzy, in light of everything, the research, the crowd, his son, resurrection, I think Geppetto started the frenzy to murder everybody for their Ergo. He lifts the Covenant, orders the violent massacre, works with the Alchemists to get all of the Ergo collected here so that he could resurrect his original son. That's the only thing I can think of. I just don't think he knew that I was already basically a human by this point. So I deny him my heart, and he scoffs about how Carlo was mischievous too, and how I inherited that from him. But he confirms that I'm just a puppet, a tool for resurrecting his son.
I believed you were a good boy. If you refuse, then I'll have to retrieve it myself. My son.
Geppetto has those gloves Marchiona had. He was a master puppeteer this whole time, and I'm sure this was his son's actual body. During the fight, he never admits to instilling us with the Grand Covenant because he put Carlo inside of us. Hitting him with Lea's moves opens up the match into the second phase. Severing the connection to Geppetto, the corpse of Carlo is able to move freely. But Geppetto just tries to hurt my feelings by calling me a puppet and nothing more. Did you see the nameless puppet? The real Carlo, his left arm? It looks like it got cut off. Maybe that's why we have our left arm the way that we do, and why Geppetto needs the arm of God. Maybe he's gonna put it there. Soon we kill the nameless puppet.
Were you going to destroy Carlo's heart? You're just a useless puppet.
I have a final report on the Krat experiment.
You certainly took your time, Paracelsus. Your findings?
I think we have a new brother. A new type of humanity, so to speak.
There are many forms of eternal life.
It's intriguing, and worth further observation.
Noted. And we'll have to get his arm back anyway.
I'm counting on it. Expect another report at the next meeting. Paracelsus returning. Ah, and when I return, I will find her. For sure. Another key of ours. Dorothy.
A couple of things. How did Geppetto know that the puppet was going straight for Carlo's heart? How did he move that fast to intercept? And was the nameless puppet purposely going for his heart in order to try and stop his father from resurrecting him entirely? Maybe he wants to rest, if that's the case. And that guy on the train looked a lot like that guy from the hotel, next to the gold coin tree. The hair color, the fit, I don't know what it all means, but he says a new brother, a new humanity, multiple forms of immortality, definitely referring to Carlo and the Ergo. He does mention getting his arm back. I guess he's referring to the arm of God, but I don't know who the his is referring to. But also, I don't know any Paracelsus from my childhood stories. And then Dorothy and the Red Shoes. Will Lies of P tie into other childhood stories? Peter Pan, Wizard of Oz, Mulan? That would be cool to see. I can't wait for the next game in the series. But still, I want to know what those boss puppets said. Starting up New Game Plus, I come face to face with the parade master who welcomes me in. Then he says bad kids get the stick, and how I could have given the king a real festival. Murphy says that he wants to avenge his friends, but while I cut him up, he says that his back is hot and he is exploding. When he dies, he comments that he's freezing cold, like his friends. I think maybe he's referring to how his friends turned into chunks of Ergo. At Venigni's factory, Fuoco tells us to join him, venerating Romeo, saying that he needs bigger flames before dying, his voice going out to his king. A couple of other things I did differently in my second run. I told fake Alidoro to go to the factory instead of the hotel. It doesn't change the fact that they still break in later on. When I get to the King of Puppets, I realize he's been trying to reach me this whole time. I just didn't understand what he was saying. He said it sucks how we meet this way, how I am wrong and I need to listen. But it's seeing Romeo that makes this a terrible boss fight, because I am forced to fight my childhood friend. Geppetto pinned us both against each other. Romeo says that he needs to kill me because there's no other way. And I just remembered he was trying to stop Simon as well. When I killed him, he thanks me for freeing him. He even calls me Carlo. And so I realize Geppetto did cause the puppet frenzy, but I think Romeo was able to break free and start making his own decisions at some point. Geppetto was the one pulling the strings, until he couldn't control Romeo anymore, which is why he put him in our path. Moving forward, this time I don't give the Stalkers golden fruit, and I tell Polendina the truth, who admits that he wanted to hear a sweet lie instead of the cold reality. Fast forward to the beach of Alchemist Isle, standing next to the afterimage of Lea hits differently now that we've met. I continue and I kill the black cat, who says that he didn't want to burden his sister anymore anyways. Don't worry, she's next. And when it comes to the part where we have to decide if we want to mercy kill Sophia, I choose not to see what happens when we don't. She doesn't disappear physically like she did before, but I think her essence gets lost somehow and possibly remains tortured. Putting on her brother's clothes, I kill the red fox. I lie to Geppetto while he's in the cage, telling him that he was a trustworthy father. And then in this ending, I give him my heart like he asks.
Yes. You are a good boy till the very end. I believed in you. You are the greatest puppet I ever made. This finally feels like family. Thank you for returning, Carlo.
Is this truly the future you wanted?
I don't know why he went back to kill everybody at the hotel. I guess he was trying to tie up loose ends. If you enjoyed your time here with me, liking the video means I can keep doing this. If you made it this far, type down below, "There are no strings on me," and click the video on the screen to see the tragic story of Claire Obscure, Expedition 33. The name Claire Obscure is French for light dark, or more fully, light and shadow. In art, it refers to the technique known in Italian as chiaroscuro,